Hello and welcome to our Maritime Impact podcast series. I'm your host Eirik Nyhus, Director Environment for Maritime at DNV. In our last episode of Series 8, I'm joined by Granqvist, Vice President Maritime at Gasum. Gasum is a key player in the transition to cleaner energy in the maritime sector, offering sustainable fuel options like LNG and renewable biogas. In response to the new FuelEU maritime regulation, they also offer innovative pooling solutions to under and over compliant vessels. So listeners of this episode can expect insights into the practicalities of joining a pooling arrangement and a wider perspective on where maritime stands in its efforts to secure low carbon fuels, also considering the different GHG reduction potentials of these fuels. So thanks for joining the podcast today, Jakob. It's really great to have you here.
Yeah, thank you so much, Eirik, for having me. This is so great, having colleagues and friends following the podcast and now finally be a part of it. This is just fantastic.
I'm glad to hear you say that. It's really good to also meet some of our listeners. To be honest, I really appreciate that. Listen, we're going to dive into FuelEU Maritime, obviously, and what's going on with the pooling mechanisms and what you guys are doing in that context. So my first question to you really would be, can you give us an illustration of the pooling mechanisms that you guys offer at Gasum? I mean, who is typically part of the arrangements you're looking at? What are the responsibilities and so on? A rundown on that would be great.
Yeah, thanks for asking, Eirik. And looking at the pooling as what do you call it, like a structure or phenomenon now, even coming next year under Fuel EU regulation, I think it's very important to understand the fundamentals of it and how does it really work, because we see a lot of shipping companies and stakeholders in the industry that they still are asking like really the fundamental questions. So the pooling concept is really like one has too much and the other has too little, and then you can compensate the one who has too little with the compliance units of the one who has too much. And what Gasum's role in this play is that we get these parties together and we manage a commercial pool in order to sort out that, okay, these might generate too much compliance for their own usage, and how could they benefit from that? And on the other hand, we have those who have too little compliance, running on conventional fuel maybe, or whatever the reasons may be. These will be then helped out in this commercial pool, and they will be compliant by joining the pool.
So you're in a sense doing two different things here. You're acting as a broker by bringing people together, but you're also offering the services to make this whole thing work, right?
Yes, and not only that, we are also bringing the fuel into the mix so that we bring, in this case now, so far, renewable biogas to the customers who are running normally on LNG. So we are bringing the fuel, we are bringing the logistics, so we are kind of owning the whole value chain, but then we are bringing friends and customers into the pool as well and connect them with each other.
In connection with that, of course, we have this timing issue because from a formal point of perspective, you just need to declare a pool by 30th of April, the year after the reporting year. But based on the way you're describing this, it seems clear to me that this is something that really needs to be thought of during the reporting year itself in order to get arrangements up and running, right?
Yes, absolutely. I don't think that any company involved in this would like to wait for kind of a lottery to turn out like over a year after the actual pooling year ended. So what we are doing is that we follow up on a voyage and monthly basis the compliance within the pool. So it follows this balance, but then also make sure that we match the balance with the customers in the pool, to be prudent, but also to give security to the ones who are joining the pool and who are members of the pool, that this is being handled so that they don't have to wait until the end of the year before they know that was the pool actually compliant with the regulations.
Right. Obviously, you are looking at an extension beyond the bare bones of just matching buyers and sellers, if you will, of compliance units. When you think of the selection of a pooling solution, I mean, since you're mentioning that you're already offering initially needed low carbon fuels, biogas to comply, or maybe even over comply, that tells me that you need to have, of course, control of. What are the actual consumption figures and where does your compliance balance stand as you move through the year, correct?
Yes, that's absolutely correct again. And in order to be able to manage it, you need a prudent system to do so. And there are many in the market now offering this and that, but we are very confident of choosing your good company as being the compliance or using the pooling tool from DNV called Emissions Connect. And many ship owners will be familiar with Emission Connect already, and DNV is, I would say, if I remember figures correctly, you are already handling some 55% of market reporting at MRV. So it gives confidence to the customers within the pool, but also credibility to the pool itself by so this is it sounds easy and it should be like an exercise on kind of a in an Excel sheet, but when you start drilling into the details, it needs to be waterproof, the whole thing.
Yeah, it does. And like you say, we, of course, with Emissions Connect, we are providing that data validation and provision service. But we still, of course, have the issue of, yes, providing data, important. You get every party can negotiate from at least a common understanding of what the reality is, which matters. We still have all the issues of how to set up the relevant contracts, charter parties, and commercial arrangements, which is also a non-trivial task, shall we say.
Yeah.
Uh, so how do you see your role as a company in providing fuel through this pooling management? How would that impact or reshape the traditional bunker market? Do you see different contractual setups appearing there as well?
I wouldn't say that we are quite there yet, but as you know, the shipping industry are kind of a late mover in general when it comes to new regulations. But we do see that traction is picking up amongst the shipping community. And now this week, the BIMCO templates for charter party and owner agreements include like the amendments for the FuelEU came out, and now at least people have something to disagree on. So, so this at least helps to untangle the wonders and the mystery of who will be liable and how to handle this and so on. For operators that are owning their own vessels, they are the DOC holders and then as such are liable within the Fuel EU regulatory context. It's quite easy, but when you have in shipping, as everybody knows, you have like these short, long, mid, long term charter parties and arrangement with owners, charters, and operators, it isn't always that clear who should be involved and so on, and who should be actually liable for it. So what we are setting up now in our commercial pool is, of course, there are contracts with whoever then is liable. But this is also something that we need to be prudent with, like who will be the contractual party. Because even though a charter might pay for the fuel, if they haven't agreed with the DOC holder of who will be liable within the Fuel EU context, they might not have the right to sign up to the pool. So,
Right.
so these are contractual things that we are sorting out now as we go along, and it's a extended know your customer investigation as well, and including then whoever has contacted us and is interested in the pooling business.
Yeah. Now, we had a discussion on this in the last episode with my good colleague Helge Hermundsgaard, who you also know, of course.
Yes.
I touched on these issues, like, I mean, who owns over-compliance when you have a charter party that, from in most cases, will be shorter than a year? Who's responsible for under-compliance? What happens when all of this gets transferred during either change of management or during the settlement process at the end of the TC? Like you say, lots of things here to take care of. Lots of lawyers work.
Yeah, it becomes very complex. If you have charter parties that are extended throughout the calendar year, and that is the period of the fuel EU regulation and pooling as well, Then if you have shorter or longer or something in between, it then, or if a charter party or relationship ends mid compliance period, it becomes very delicate. And we are just mapping a black hole right now. It's like
Yeah.
we're in untreaded territory,
Yeah, we
and
really are.
and this is now something that we are doing with our legal partners, together with the owners and with the DOC holders and with the charters, and figuring out how to really maneuver in this area.
Hmm.
Some customers have it very straightforward, as I said, but they are very complex uh, arrangements as well that needs to be sorted somehow. And I
Yeah.
guess that now everything is in the making. Once we get a little bit more standardized on this, it will be just business as usual. But now everybody is a little bit waiting for each other to make a first move and suggest things as well.
So just, to try to recap my understanding of the way your system works. On the one hand, you are, of course, you're creating a pool. You're guaranteeing that the pool will be compliant to the stakeholders involved in the pool, which of course will be a range of different companies and so on. And then in order to ensure that you can actually achieve that goal, you are actually also providing fuel with a very low greenhouse gas intensity that will be able to drive the necessary the compliance balance to the necessary level. Is that a correct snapshot?
I would say you got it quite correctly there, Eric. And the value that we bring is that we have these long-term off-taker customers that are buying LNG and biogas already from us today, and we have long-lasting relationships, and we have term deals that will extend throughout next year.
Right. So you're
And
really moving in a long-term market and not just
yes,
called a spot market.
and with the long-term customers that we have, it's a great platform to generate compliance,
Hmm.
because these are customers that burn LNG usually, and to some extent biogas already. But we see that with the pooling arrangement, we can utilize the capabilities of these customers, and by such generating a kind of a secure stream of compliance, if you may call it that.
Yeah,
And then
long-term certainty, right?
yeah, exactly. And we have our own production. We have some 20 biogas plants that's producing biogas currently, and we also are sourcing off-take agreements, but also in the spot market. Then we are also in the program of e-methane going forward. So we can ensure the molecules that will generate the compliance. So it's not something that we will have to fetch from day one. It's something that we have already. So we have a quite vast portfolio already. And then, of course, what is new to us, we have the logistics. Now we are entering into the cooperation and partnership with DNV for the system to do this. So what we need now are the off-takers, the ones who are in need of compliance. But to have all this in place, what I just talked about, that is so crucial now to have the credibility as a pool manager come next year. Because if we wouldn't perform and this wouldn't be compliant at the end of the year, then all of our customers would be in breach. And that would have then serious economical consequences for those owners and dock holders.
I'm sure that they're in their contracts with you, they will also try to create some certainty that they're not going to be stuck with a huge bill if unforeseen events happen. But let's just move on a little bit here, because obviously, at the core of this is this greenhouse gas intensity. And yes, you are providing LNG, biogas, but in the broader sense, we'll have providers, of course, providing all kinds of molecules out there. So the question, I guess, would be how can operators or managers, if you will, ensure that they get the fuel with the highest reduction potential or the necessary reduction potential? Because that would mean that reduction potentials linked to the GHG intensity, of course, needs to be, the information on that needs to be transparent. You got to know what you're buying. And that, I guess, brings us into the whole certification space. And any thoughts on that part of it, Jakob?
Yeah, many thoughts, of course. and I was almost about to say that this will revolutionize the buying of fuels going forward. Traditionally, you are buying fuels on volume or mass, and suddenly that doesn't really matter, because renewable fuels, it will be all about what you get from the fuels, and that is not volume or mass. It will be in the future CI score and emission reduction that we have to look at. And here, of course, as we own the value chain and we own the molecules and even produce the molecules, we have quite a good hunch of where the CI score is on the carbon intensities on those fuels. So it will be something that our customers in the pool, they don't need to worry about, because we will generate compliance, and that's up to us how we generate the compliance and how much fuel we then need to use in or burn with the compliance generators in order to create or produce that compliance surplus. But for the ones that are doing this themselves, of course they need to be very strict when they buy fuels, that what is the actual reduction of the fuels they are buying. And today there are very few suppliers, I would say, that would like to give up front. Like if you book today, let's say renewable diesel, HVO or FAME for next year, it's very hard to say that what is the actual reduction value of those fuels.
Hmm. Hmm.
So it goes down to the batches and the volumes that they are getting on the spot there. For sure, some can guarantee something, but it's still a myriad of certificates and whatnot that you need to manage as a ship owner or operator in order to manage this yourselves.
Yeah, I mean, just the proof of sustainability chain. Even though we don't have the final guidance ready quite yet, we'll be getting that in the next few months, I hope. But still, proof of sustainability chains in Europe and some other parts of the world, yeah, they can probably be managed well. But we will have ships, of course, coming into Europe that have gotten their biofuel or low carbon fuel in other parts of the world where there may be questions raised to the, shall we say, transparency and validity of the traceability chain there. So I do expect to see the legislators in Europe scratching their heads quite a lot on how they are actually going to manage to get a kind of global system in place, or at least a global approach that the EU can accept in general. So I think we have interesting times ahead on that one, to be very
No, for
honest.
sure, and it is. That's also what we see with owners now, and the ones who we are discussing with now that are interested in the pool and to pool their vessels, is that it's so much uncertainty in the certification and in the validation of certain fuels. So if you bunker today alternative fuels in Asia, for example, and sail to Europe, now it is not regulatory demand for it, it's voluntary reduction, then it's something that you can agree on with whoever wants to pay for it. But when it comes like in a regulatory regime, then it needs to be very prudent. But this is also a reason why we see that there is traction for the pooling business. That it like you can just continue to operate as before, and you don't need to worry about certificates or availabilities or even engine damage that some are concerned of, and so on. Some are maybe more valid concerns than others, but there are still a lot of uncertainties, and by this we
Yeah.
could just like kind of fix it all.
Yeah, I mean, in the broader sense here, since we're talking about that, I mean, obviously we have the EU pooling mechanism, which is kind of covered in the regulatory bit, but where we have all the other commercial and contractual stuff. Then, of course, we also have the IMO, which is working on their greenhouse gas fuel intensity system, and there is still the ongoing discussion there on what kind of pooling mechanism, if any, we'll be getting, and. I mean, it's difficult to predict, but I'm pretty sure that we will be getting something that's not identical to what the EU has done. There will be differences. So there will be lots of efforts to try to align and consider how to make this all work in a contractual environment, in a commercial environment, when you are subject to international and regional regulations that overlap each other. So you guys will have plenty to think about here.
No, well, we already have without even considering the IMO at current stage, and it's a myriad of things, and
Yeah.
it's for sure. If I would be a ship owner, it would be kind of easy to outsource all of that management and all of that compliance figuring out stuff to somebody else, and just please go ahead and do it, and I will be just a happy sailor doing what I have always done, and somebody else will take care of all the difficult stuff.
I think that many will want to go down that road if they can, and of course, if the price is reasonable. It's
Yeah.
always that.
No, no, it
But
will be at the end it will be a commercial discussion, but then of course you know and I know that there are a lot of uncertainties about availability of fuels as well, and going in now into next year when you also not only have the maritime regulations coming online, but you also
exactly,
have the aviation regulations coming online. So
yep.
what will there be left over for the shipping industry to burn when it comes to renewable fuels? That is, I think, the $1,000 question here, maybe $1 million even.
It really is, and it's interesting you raise that because I was going to raise the same thing and then simply ask you exactly the answer to that $1 million question. You know, when maritime is going to be competing with all these other industries, even though maybe there will be some alleviation with less demand from road because of electrification, there's still going to be this huge sucking sound coming from other industrial sectors that maritime will have to compete with. Uh, to be very put it very simply, what would your advice be to the maritime industry? What they need to do to secure sufficient amounts of the kind of molecules they need? What would your advice be?
To me, the shipping industry, and believe me, I'm born and bred in the shipping industry. I know nothing else, and I've been working for ship owners my whole life. Now, lately, I slid into the energy business as well. But we can't be so self-oriented and only think that we would be the off-takers of renewable fuels, and also that the pricing mechanism of the fuel will not be cost plus, it be whatever the market will pay the highest price.
Yeah, that's a significant change, I think.
And to get that into the mindset of the ones who are buying fuels, and also when making strategies for your shipping company what alternative fuel to burn in the future, I think that this is really crucial to understand the fundamentals of the fuels market in general. Let's take a simple example as methanol. Green methanol has been kind of the great hype, and it's been seen as this is the future fuel to go on, like until a few months ago maybe. And now people are starting really to question, like, is there availability? But talking also to the producers of methanol, they see that, well, suddenly there's the aviation market opening up for exploration, and everybody knows that the aviation industry has a higher payment capability than the maritime industry. But then what people tend to forget is that if you continue to refine the methanol molecule slightly, suddenly you have the plastics industry opening up.
Yeah.
And it's easy to make an example like, who do you think will pay the most for the ton? Is it somebody who is producing small plastic bricks for toys? Or is it a big liner company steaming from A to B? So if you can get the decarbonization attached to a consumer product, the willingness to pay and the market there is so much bigger. And we all know that the plastic industry, that they have a huge task if they want to decarbonize. But the payment capabilities are much greater than the shipping industries.
Those are very interesting observations, Jakob.
So we need to rethink how we're going to play this game in order to get those fuels. And people tend to also compare the fossil fuels that we are burning right now with the alternative fuels of the future. And yeah, it's so much more expensive and whatnot. But yes, it is. But it's not the same fuel. So yes, it will be a higher expense for taking a container from A to B or whatever goods you're shipping. But that's just the fact. It shouldn't be compared because you're not comparing apples against apples.
Interesting observations, Jakob. Listen, I think we are coming up close on time here. So I would like to take the opportunity to thank you very much for joining me today, because it's been really great just talking with you. And I think we'll continue this conversation offline in future times as well, because I think we have a lot of interesting things to discuss here. So thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you, Eric. It's been an absolute honor to be guesting your show, and I think that we could do a whole season of talks around this subject if you would just let me. But absolutely, we will continue the talks, and happy to be at your service.
Well, thank you, Jakob. It was really great talking to Jakob today, and there were many, many points there that I'm sure we'd all like to elaborate further on. And who knows, maybe we'll be getting back into this next year as well. But for the time being, just three very quick takeaways. First off, pooling, very viable option, and it's very interesting the way Gasum is setting this up in connection with the provision of alternative fuels and bio-LNG, for instance. There are providers setting up interesting services, and we will see a range of these services, but this one, quite interesting. Last point I want to make is that timing actually matters here. Be aware that even though we have the 30th of April, the year after the reporting date, as a deadline for declaring a pool and so on, if you're going to make this work in a commercial space, you actually need to start looking into this in the year of the reporting itself and not too late into that year. So keep that in mind. Keep your powder dry. Don't get too stressed about all the different variables here, but start talking to people who are actually versed in this commercial space to get your compliance strategies off the ground. Thank you for joining us for this episode. You've been listening to the Maritime Impact podcast from DNV with me, Eirik Nyhus. It was a real pleasure to have Jakob with me to round up Series 8, which focused a lot on FuelEU Maritime. We'll be back in the spring to look at the outcome of MEPC 83, where an agreement on some key measures to comply with the revised strategy is expected. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to give us a rating or a review. Thank you for listening.